listener production.
I'm automotive commentator and journalist Greg Rust, and this is Rusty's Garage. For this episode, I'm on the Gold Coast, but wishing I could be in Sydney face-to-face with my old Speed Series TV colleague Michael Caruso. It's just the way both of our schedules have worked out. I'm excited for him, pairing up with Mark Winterbottom for the coming Supercars Enduros. He's known Frosty since they were youngsters in karting. Michael, in this chat, talks about what life is like now as a co-driver and what he's doing Monday to Friday when he's not with Team 18. The skills he's learned out of the car as a professional sports person and perhaps even on the TV side that serve him incredibly well now. He's a proud family man, and you'll get a sense of that, not to mention the inspirational impact his dad had on his career, plus a special moment getting to drive a wild race car that was almost like a moment of handing the Caruso race baton over. The legend, who has been in his corner for a long time and whose words of wisdom shaped him on the path to the highest level of the sport in this part of the world. Michael pursued international opportunities too. He was a gun in karts, won a title when Formula 3 in Australia had some seriously cool cars and a very competitive field. His loyalty stands out in two decent stints as a full-timer in the Supercars field, one with Gary Rogers and the other as part of the Nissan program with the Kellys. He talks about parking his race licence for a time and just how difficult that decision was, and a hidden cooking talent. What it was like to drive an F3000 car at the limit, plus the price tag that would come with taking that European path. We begin with a kind of impassioned plea from me to fire up an award-winning rival podcast that he was a part of in recent years, which is tucked up in its own garage for now. This chat between us is just so easy. That's a great reflection of the person that Michael is. It's engaging, funny, and insightful. I hope you enjoy being part of it. Michael Caruso, welcome to the podcast. It is great to get you on. Fans will want to, before we look back on the early part of your life and time in motor racing, want to know what is happening with Below the Bonnet. Will that ever resurface, that podcast? Can we start with that?
Rusty, thanks for bringing that up straight off the bat. It's one thing that I love when I go to the racetrack. I feel like that's the one thing that I'm remembered most for at the moment, to be honest.
I remember you for more than that, for the record. But no, a lot of fans loved it. So
yeah, look, and Dave included. He rings me like every second week to ask me if we're going to get it going again and how we're going to do it, and chatting about it. And look, it was so much fun. I mean, look at the success that you're having, mate. It, like, when you're really enjoying it and you do something you love, you really get a lot out of it. It's not just about talking to people that you like or interested in and what have you. You get a lot of satisfaction out of it. But it's also a lot of hard work, which I'm sure you can do a test to, the effort that goes in is not purely just sitting down and talking. There's a bit of research and obviously a bit of development as well in terms of, looking ahead and making sure you've got enough to cover for the show and future shows.
Where did the genesis of that come from? Because you brought together yourself, David Reynolds, who you talked about, who's got a, kind of left of field thinking sometimes, and there was a bit of irreverence about it. Yeah, it is. And you also brought into that, he's off doing his own podcast now as well, but you also brought in Andrew Van Leeuwen, who's a very respected, award-winning journalist. It was kind of a great combo. Who came up with it, and how did it all start?
So Dave and I had the concept many years ago, and it was actually a couple of years before we actually got kicked off. We obviously got a pretty good relationship there, and we'd spoken about doing something, and it did take a while for him to twist my arm to get it happening. And then once we did get off and running, we're like, okay, we're going to do this now. And funny enough, it was when I had I had a bit more time on my hands when I went to a co-driver role. So obviously that's one thing. That there's quite a bit of work in the background. So I was like, okay, I've got a bit of time now, a bit more time. I'll invest a bit of time putting into it. And then we thought, okay, well, it's not. We thought it would be good to have a probably more balanced opinion, and bring on a journalist. We'd had a long relationship with Andrew and what have you, and we thought, okay, let's bring someone else that could potentially just bring in a bit more of that balance and a less, sort of leverage the show from in the sense that they can talk about some of the stuff that's going on that we might not have, and so on and so forth. And then it just ended up turning to three mates just talking crap and motor racing. So,
did you have to cut much out of it, or was it what listeners heard was what we got?
It was absolute. Whatever they heard was literally what it was, and that was probably the best part about it. Is it was easy in that sense. We didn't have to turn on in any way. I mean, you sort of hear about that in the media space a bit. Is you have to get your game face on and what have you. But our game face was literally just being ourselves. So lots of fun. And to your early question of if we're going to do it again. Who knows? Maybe when Dave becomes a co-driver. No, I don't know. To be honest, we'd love to do it. We'd love to.
Cool. Well, this is my vote. I'll start the wave. I'd like to see a rebirth happen at some stage, so you guys can iron that out. Good luck with that mission with him. You grew up, mate, in Sydney. Life has kind of come full circle for you because you are back there now. Am I right in saying, in sharing the story for the audience, of course, that your dad's involvement, his love in motor racing was a very powerful influence for you as a young kid, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so, Rusty. He started off as a car mechanic, so his love for cars started virtually from when he could drive. So he got into that, and then he started doing some sort of sport car racing, I guess, which was just basically, getting a road car and going out to Oran Park and Amaroo and what have you. And that quickly turned into sports sedans.
Yeah, cool.
And he's a massive Ford fan, might I add. So it always had to be a Ford. He had an ex-wife from his early days, and then he got an XC, and then ended up with an XE in the end. But yeah, look, I grew up at the racetrack. I mean, some of my fondest memories of motor racing is literally, and for those that can wind the clock that far back, there's a little kids park on the last turn at Amaroo Park, and I remember Dad, before he'd go, for each race, he would walk me down, open the gate, which was obviously a lot taller than me, which probably still is today, leave me in the park, and I'd play in the park while he was out racing on the track. And thinking about it now, like I've got kids, to do something like that, well, be quite unique. I mean, it was positioned literally on the last corner, so it was like prime positioning as well for watching
near
the race.
Press room, I think, wasn't it? Behind the press room there, maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was just below. Yeah, it was like a 2-story building there. Yeah, cool. I mean, that's the stuff that I remember. Climbing up the hill on stop go corner and off the rocks and.
Yep.
So growing up at the racetrack, it was always going to be difficult for my dad to say no to me when I wanted to go motor racing. But like Rusty, I mean, he chats with you when he comes out quite a bit, and he loves it. I mean, he absolutely loves motor racing, and I think sometimes more than I do, to be fair. So I'm quite fortunate that I had, one of my biggest supporters is, my dad, and that's fundamentally how I really got into it.
Great track, Amaroo. You've brought up some fond memories, and I cherish those chats with your dad. He's always got this beautiful effervescence about him, this beautiful smile when I see him, and as you say, a passionate motorsport man. There is a connection as well for you and the family with the great Kevin Bartlett too, isn't there? Tell us about that and the connection in the early part of your career. I mean, certainly I think he was in the background, perhaps maybe in a mentoring capacity in Formula 3 and things like that, wasn't he?
Yeah, KB, he resided on the Northern Beaches in his early days, and that's where the family, where we're from, and Dad helped him out he was one of his mechanics in the Formula 5000 days. So
awesome.
You probably quickly understand why he loves motor racing so much. I mean, those Formula 5000 things, although being a death trap, they were unbelievable.
Beast.
Fast, scary fast, amazing cars, and some of the stuff that I've seen, is pretty cool. So Dad, having the opportunity to work with someone like KB, in that he inevitably have wanted to help me out, when I got into motor racing, and particularly because I was very motivated and interested in open wheelers, there was no better person to ask for support and mentor me through to become a more complete driver. And I was very fortunate to be able to work with him and still catch up to this day. So amazing person. What he gives back to the sport as well is so unique.
Still doing it.
He's a clerk of the course, and he's a driver coach as well. And he's always trying to help. And it's so nice to see that someone that got a lot from the sport is happy to give that back as well. And someone that everybody respects, no doubt.
Is there one moment with him that sort of sticks in your mind, something that he perhaps showed you, taught you? I'm sure there's plenty of things, but maybe one along the way?
Let me come back to that. That is so tough. I've learnt so much, to be honest, from him. It'd be hard to put it to one thing, but to be fair, a lot of the stuff that I learnt from him, or that I still hold to this day, is around the technical understanding of a race car and how to really identify from driving a car, how to translate that into feedback that can improve a race car, or at least give the support to the team to be able to try to improve it. So I'll never forget the way he explained to me, particularly around springs and how they work, and this being in an open wheeler car, coming out of go-karting and what have you have no idea about that stuff. And I understood what the car was doing in terms of understeer and oversteer and all that, but to then translate that into making an adjustment and make the car faster is something that not everyone can shift and do, and I was fortunate enough that he could guide me in that way to fundamentally help me become a more complete driver.
You are I'm bouncing around here deliberately because it leads me to the fact that you are running with Team 18 in the Enduros, and as a part of the little bit of research for this, they tell me that on ride days, test days, etc., you are like the second or third engineer. That you will run up to Frosty with the tablet, quick, let's get the info, da-da-da-da. You enjoy, and maybe it stems from that stuff that KB instilled in you, but do you enjoy that side of it and helping to understand the race car, iron it out, and make it that package that you need? Yeah.
You've clearly done your research there. I like that person, but why would I be surprised, mate? You're the absolute most professional media person I've ever worked with. So, everything I do, I invest myself completely, and with Team 18 and Mark particularly, obviously we've got a very, very long relationship. I've known him longer than his wife Renee has. That's how far it goes back. Okay. Having raced each other since we were young kids. And for Mark, he's like, it's hard to tell him how to improve in terms of driving, but obviously when we come to trying to get in terms of handling a car, I just want to be there to help. And simple things. And I remember when I obviously was driving full time, you'd come in and your engineer would tell you certain things on your radio, but you wouldn't know. You could, painting a picture, or at least seeing the data and seeing where you are on the timesheets and seeing where your sector times are broken down into the 10 or 12 sectors, the mini sectors over the whole circuit, and having all that information to be able to turn that into something that you can translate to on the track to improve is something that is difficult because you don't have the manpower, as we know. In supercars, they're now limited to the amount of people. So every time I go out there, I try to just provide as much a value as I can, not just from a driving perspective, but if he's doing well, that means I'm going to be doing well. So that's sort of, plus he's a good guy as well. So I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. That's for sure.
You have evoked a memory for me. So I got more, you and I can see each other for this chat. I have more grey hair, way more grey hair than you. But that is because you have no grey hair, you have none. But that is because I reckon I can vividly recall learning to commentate on the PA at places like Lithgow and little Michael Caruso, little Mark Winterbottom being there and racing. What was the first kart? How did that come about? Did you take to it like a duck to water? Take us there.
No, definitely didn't take it like a duck to water. I started slightly later than Mark, and I remember he started when he was 7, so I was sort of coming in a few years later. I didn't kick off till I was 12. So by the time I was getting into it, one of my first races, you do 4 races on your P plates when you're in go-karts, and I don't know if this be the case anymore, but at the time you did 4 races, and the 5th race we were like, why don't we enter the Nationals? So just the hardest event of them all, and it happened to be at Lithgow. So we turn up to the Nationals in my 5th event, and we're running around, and we get into the final. And on the very last lap, last corner, I'll never forget, the boys were coming to lap me. And I'm talking like Ryan Briscoe, Mark Winterbottom, Troy Hunt. It was the full field. It was like the who's who of Australian motorsport in Junior J lights. And I had no idea, I was never looking back because there was no one to look back for, mind you. So I'm looking forward, and these guys are coming around the outside of me, and I'd inadvertently be involved in the hunt for the Australian Championship on the last corner, with everyone sort of just going around me in this blaze. But yeah, that was my sort of first experience or memory of racing, the likes of Mark and some of those guys. But yes, definitely not a duck to water.
Take us to how Dad and family stitched this together, and what was the kind of car that you had to take the kart to the track, and what are we talking? You've mentioned you were J's there, obviously. To what type of kart was it, and so on? So my first kart was it was a DAP. Surprise, surprise, Italian make go-kart, very famous. And I was actually working pretty closely with Dean Cano. So they were close with the importer for DAP. And Dino was actually one of the guys in the fight for the championship. And that day in 1994 or what have you, it would have been earlier than that. Yeah, 94 or 93. So yeah, that was some time ago. But when we got involved in karting, obviously for myself, I remember the first thing I did when my dad got me a go-kart was put a Ferrari sticker on on the NASA panel, like right bang in the middle of the thing, because obviously big fan of Ferrari. You have to be, I think, in growing up in an Italian household. But it was lots of fun. Dad invested a lot of time in me and Mum, obviously, but to go out virtually every single weekend, practicing and testing, and we raced in Junior J lights and Junior J heavies. So I had, like 40 kilos of lead when I was in Junior J heavies, just to try to get extra miles in and try to catch up. Yeah, to be honest, in terms of, we talk about family sports, Rusty, motorsport, and we still see it to the day, and I don't think I realised that until now when I sort of go to the racetrack and walk around, but it's such a family-orientated sport. It's very difficult to do unless you've got that support as a young kid to get into motorsport. So your family normally taking you around. Our first car that we had was, Dad had a Land Cruiser, which he still owns to today, might I add. Really?
And that's what we used to go around in everywhere. We got had our little kart trailer, double-decker sort of little kart trailer thing, and I laugh about it. I'm actually where I work now. The family that I work with used to race karts as well, and we used to go karting together quite a bit. So it really is some of the best memories. It's some of the best motor racing that you do in your life as well. I mean, I've been lucky to race in all different levels and competitions, but in terms of pure racing, there's it's difficult to find something where you're actually competing and have that those moments where you're racing against someone and it's just wheel to wheel and it's driver v driver. There's so much at stake, and there's a lot to lose as well. So it's very satisfying in karting to go racing at a top level for sure.
When did you go from nearly being lapped in the Australian titles to being competitive race winner Michael Caruso, and how, in that journey, was it, just this sole obsession for you? That's all you wanted to do, or was it just a pastime and that beautiful family connection that you've talked about? I mean, it does have one of the spin-offs our sport has is the unity it provides family. I mean, some family have difficulty keeping kids together and troubles that emerge from that. I mean, that is actually one of the unsung benefits of motor racing and how it keeps that unity in family.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of going from last to winning, it took about a year until I got onto the pace and where I was competing. I think I went back a year later in the state championships at Lithgow, and Alan Gurr and I, another last lap battle. We'd race each other all weekend. We went, race for race. I'd win a heat, he'd win a heat, so on and so forth. And we got to the final, and we were basically 500 metres up the road of everybody. And he crashed me out in the second last corner, and we hated each other for years, but we end up turning out to be good mates. But these are the stories that you and moments that you just never forget. At the time, we were so livid at each other that we obviously both wanted it so bad. But you're right. Even Alan and his father and his family. His brother raced as well. You talk about family and you see it everywhere. And even today, you look at categories like Toyota 86 and what have you, the whole family come away and they've got a car towing a trailer. They've got a truck or whatever they have towing the car on the back, and they're either sleeping in their car and, they've got their whole life in this little garage. And we're so comfortable and used to, at the top level in supercars, you get very easy complacent, but you look at how they do it and you think, yep, that's exactly, that's what it was like, at one point. So you get lots of, it's hard. It's definitely not easy, motor racing. There's lots of challenges, like I'm sure every sport, but there's one thing for sure that you get out of it is if you can be surrounded by your family and have that support, it's down the track though when you start to actually really get, see it and enjoy it.
We'll get to the move into kind of cars and racing in a second here, but I want a little bit of a snapshot of young Michael Caruso and life in a kind of beautiful Italian family. Now, my question is a little bit loaded here. Rick Kelly tells me that about this time of year, when we record, he doesn't mind bringing you some Mildura oranges, which you have a fondness for, right? But he says you have never returned the favour and made him your homemade pasta. Apparently you can make pasta. Is this true?
Gosh, you really are prepared today, mate. Thanks, Rico. I love the Mildura oranges. He's spot on. Absolutely love them. There's something about, I don't know what they've got in the soil up there, but they actually are amazing. We used to do those training camps for each year, particularly for the Enduras, and we'd find our way walking through the orange fields and what have you. And I'd want to take a box home every single time because they were unbelievable. So that's some of the Kelly background there in terms of what they do outside of motor racing. But I love cooking. I'm very lucky. Grew up obviously around food, and my mum is a great cook, and fortunate now my wife looks after me as well. But we spend a lot of time at home most Sundays. We have family lunch, and we'll cook a meal, and maybe 8 times out of 10, it'll be pasta as well. So I do like it, but we also been one thing that I know Rick does enjoy as well is is actually salami. So we do salami as well. So I know the boys used to enjoy a bit of homemade salami. So, yeah, cooking's very much a part of our DNA.
Awesome. Todd Kelly used to kind of really, with those training camps, do some seriously hardcore things. Were there any moments where you were really tested on those? Or I think Owen Kelly told me a story, or maybe it was Murph, about being in the middle of the Never Never somewhere near Bright, and they were worried if they'd get back alive and all sorts of stuff. They were legendary, weren't they?
I'm sort of lucky I was never on that one, because everyone I've ever spoken to about that was on that actual training camp, they do make it sound like it was life or death. And I'm pretty sure it was Tim Blanchard who'd given up on life. Like literally, like, nah, I'm done, forget about me, sort of thing. And I didn't believe it until I asked him myself, and he was like, no, I was finished. He'd just given up on it, which was he'd been completely broken. So Rick tells the story when he went to run for help. It was like a 5K run, and he was running at pace because, everybody had hypothermia and what have you. And anyhow, long story short, the training camps post that were a little bit more luxurious, a little bit more drinking and eating on the farm, so it was good.
Were you good at school, and was there the kind of notion around family that, okay, if you want to go and play in karting on weekends and things, you got to be good at your schoolwork and get that done? What was that side of, and has that schooling helped you now in business and whatever you're doing?
Was it good in school? I don't know if I was good in school. I enjoyed school very much. I've lots of friendships. Some of my best friends right now literally carried all the way from high school to today. Excellent. Which is great. School was something that was, and this is being completely honest and fair, I focused on it when I had the time, but as I mentioned a bit earlier, going racing every single, virtually every single weekend, particularly in karting, was difficult to manage, because you'd be away for days on end, whether it be in Queensland, Melbourne, or Kalgoorlie, out in the middle of nowhere in WA, wherever it may be, travelling to every other second karting event. So it did make it difficult, but I did everything I could while I was there, which I enjoyed. And I was lucky the school supported me as well, in terms of they were very much aware of what my ambitions were, and I made that pretty clear that motor racing was something that not only I wanted to do, but I was going to get there either way. So, yeah, that was pretty cool.
Was it Shuey? Was it Senna? Who were the kind of idols?
It was definitely Senna in the beginning, for sure. And then obviously when Michael made the shift over to Ferrari, pretty difficult. Well, that era was unbelievable. So, yeah.
Cool. How much of a sacrifice for mum and dad early on, mate, when you were trying to get established here?
I think my parents would be very rich if they didn't send me go-karting and motor racing. It was hard. Dad had his own business. He was obviously mechanic by trade, so he had his own factory and what have you, to the point where he'd actually given it all away when I got into Super 2, so he could purely work on the car as a number one when I got into Super 2. So, I can't. I'll never be able to repay in full what my parents gave up. And you see it all the time, don't you? We see this, I know I'm not the only person, so I'm not, going to get too sentimental here, but, it's a type of sport that, the type of passion it brings out of people and is so unique. My kids play various sports on the weekend, and there's people that are passionate there, but we're talking about, I remember most weekends my dad would finish work Thursday, we'd drive overnight to get to Melbourne. The next morning at 6 a.m. you'd be getting up, going to the go-kart track, setting up, getting ready to go. This is after doing a day's work, and and most parents are doing this, and they've got their own business, whatever it may be, and then he would operate on very little sleep, and to the point where you'd race for the 3 days, get back in the car, wrap up at 6 o'clock,
straight to
drive
work.
home, next morning get up and go to work, and I'd be ruined. I'd be sleeping in the car, and you beauty, go to school the next day. So that type of investment, not just financially, is it's a lot to ask. So very lucky.
Was there ever a plan B? Was it only ever to be a racing driver? When did you kind of go, yep, this is what I'm about, what I want to be?
Oh, look, I think it was pretty early on I wanted to be that. But there was 2 occasions where I didn't renew my CAMS license. And I had a break twice for 18 months where I just didn't drive a race car. So...
how tough was that period? How much of withdrawal did you get?
It was ridiculously difficult to not drive a race car, but to not renew my license was pretty big. I was sort of like, well, I haven't got to drive. There's no cars racing sort of on the horizon here. I want to do it, but there's nothing, other than just walking around at racetracks hoping and praying. Unfortunately, the costs of going motor racing doesn't get paid on that. So, they were 2 pretty difficult moments. And then, through obviously persistence, got my last shot, which obviously is, ended me to where I am today. So, it's a difficult road, and I don't imagine it's gotten any easier. As the sport's become more professional, for sure.
How did you get a drive in a race car? What was the first race car? Where were you, and when you made that transition from karts to cars?
It was actually my dad's XC Sport sedan. So
awesome.
He still had it when all the way through my early motor racing career, and then when I made the transition, he got the car prepped up because I was going to go obviously in the cars. So he thought, we'll get you out on a racetrack so you can change gears and so on and so forth. And the thing had
that's quite a step, Michael.
Out of a go-kart. Exactly. He seemed to think, you'll be all right. I mean, him trusting me with the car as well, which was pretty good. But I played it off like it was nothing. But the car, it had 650 horsepower or something, and weighed 1,000 kilos. Blah 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 blah. So it was all hand built, and I trust him, but it was scary to drive. It was full of beans, and didn't handle too well, which didn't surprise me because that wasn't the focus. It was like most sports sedans; it was all about how fast he can go down the straight. But that was pretty unique to get to drive your dad's hand built race car.
Michael has shared a car with some cool co-drivers in the Supercars endurance races over the years, including Grant Denyer, whose love of racing started on the family farm.
Man, I'd bog some cars in my time. I remember once, whenever it would rain, I'd go, yes, because we'd only have a little Suzuki Sierra, which has no horsepower, but when it rains, you can get that thing sideways around the sheds, and it was magnificent.
Hear the Gold Logie winner's incredible TV and racing story by searching for his pod in the Rusty's Garage library. Bet they both had the race driver's seat as far forward as it would go. Sorry, Michael. Rusty definitely wrote that.
The CV shows Formula Ford as kind of the next phase, I suppose, mate. How did you stitch that together? And we're going to get to a little bit of Formula 3 stuff here in a moment. My buddy Richard Crail has reminded me of a few things from your F3 career, which are important. But tell us about that.
That was really the step into car racing from a series point of view. So way back when Ford sponsored a karting series called Ford Max Challenge, which actually Mark Winterbottom was in. I mean, most of the guys that I raced throughout my career went into that series because the end result, or the top 4 in the championship, were going to get a shot at getting a drive in a Formula Ford. And I'd won the championship, and then we did a shootout, I guess you could call it, at Winton. And then we also went to the VIS as well. So they did this sort of complete testing of an athlete. And and rated everyone and what have you. And then we got a phone call saying, "Yep, you've won the whole drive," which was all backed by Ford, which was pretty cool and unique. And that was really when I stepped up in there and and started driving. Went out of go-karting basically when I was 18, 19 years old.
What are we talking here, mate? Nearly sort of turn of the century, are we? 2000, 2001, something along those lines?
That was 01.
01,
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. How'd you go at the VIS? How fit was a Michael Caruso back then?
I was actually really fit back then. I was actually really good. Different fitness to now, but I didn't really have a full-time job back then, Rusty. So my full-time job was to be a racing car driver.
Were you gymming?
Which was good. So lots of swimming. But the things that I actually did learn there was more around my breathing and things that I just never thought about. I didn't really investigate or go down those paths, but controlling my breathing, which controls obviously your working rate as well, and little things like that. They obviously did a bit of psych testing as well, which was unique. Like I'd never done anything like that as well. So this is all pre-YouTube, I think. So there was lots of new stuff that you never really heard about.
Does some of that stuff still kind of serve you well now?
Oh, absolutely. I think probably just getting your eye open to some of the improvements, and at the time, those types of organisations were really only dealing with the best athletes in the country, whether it be by state or by nation. So it was unique to get an opportunity to go in and see that world. So that type of stuff was good because I, very much after that actually, it sparked an interest and got right involved. And a lot of what I do is just an evolution of always wanting to, I enjoy my fitness, not just because of motor racing, but I've always played football, or the world game, I like to call it.
Are you glued to the telly at the moment then, on that basis?
Oh, absolutely. The kids and I were screaming the other night. And it was funny, our whole neighbourhood, you could hear everybody. It was absolute nail-biting, wasn't it, Rusty? Just sitting there, hoping they'd get through. So that was cool. So Wednesday night we'll be watching, and Sunday hopefully for the final.
One of the highlights that sort of stand out for me in the single-seater side of things for you is Formula 3. I still look at some of those cars now, mate, and salivate. They were great cars. You had a very successful year, obviously, in winning the Australian Formula 3 Championship in 2003. Join some dots for our listeners here. I want to say, Krause reminded me, I think it was Piccola Scuderia, Michael Massey's Uncle Rudy and things like that, correct?
That was Michael Massey before everybody knew Michael Massey.
Knew him. I think he ran around with a little briefcase back then, and he ultimately ended up working with, he worked with Kelvin O'Reilly and Super Touring in the late 90s and so on, wasn't it? But yeah,
it was pretty cool. Yeah, so Formula 3 was a lot of fun. It was obviously the category had been around a couple of years, but it was coming up to speed. There was a lot of interest in it. It was sort of that next step in terms of going out of Formula Ford and trying to make it into Europe. Was really driving a car with wings and slicks. So something very much that obviously I was still wanting to pursue was that Formula 1 dream. And some of the tracks that we raced on, I'll never forget racing up in the Gold Coast in Formula 3 actually against Will Power. And he flogged me even though I came second, but that was pretty cool getting to race him. But it was, some of the best times, as that was really when KB was very much a part of, he on the radio and what have you, and guiding me through the year, which was great as well. So those cars are great fun to drive, lots of fun.
Cracking championship too, mate. I think it came down to the final race of the final round at Wakefield Park, maybe 3 points in it, you and Barton Moore. You'd had a great start to the year, and then it sort of swung back a little bit his way in the mid to early part, or second half, I should say. Peter Hackett was in there. Christian Jones was in there. Might have been a massive shunt for Kenny Habul at Oran Park.
Kenny Habul, that's right.
Pointing skyward. Ian Dyke, Carl Reindler.
That was Kenny when he first started motor racing, and I don't know if he's ever remembered back that far, but he had a huge shunt at Oran Park. Like, it was massive, and he was driving for Piccola Scudero. I know that was actually, geez, he sparked some memories there. He wasn't as fast as he is now. Let me just put it that way. Thank God. Kenny, I love you, mate.
Very diplomatic. Very diplomatic. Love it. Now, there is, from this moment, it feels like to me a little bit of a seesaw. So potential to go to F3000, maybe that was going to be ludicrously expensive. You opt, I think, to kind of stay at home, and then there was the lure again to go back overseas. So just walk us through that period and the mix of emotions, because obviously you did still have that European, international single-seater dream at that point.
Yeah, when we won that championship, we got a test drive with Carlin Motorsport. So obviously probably the premier
Trevor
team
Carlin.
back in the day at the time, and went over, did the test, and I actually never forget being there. Spent 2 days there, although only testing for one, but the first day went there and just sort of scouted the track and had a look around.
What track were you at?
Sorry?
What track?
It was Donington, sorry.
Donington, cool.
So really unique. It was good to go over there, and this is sort of pre-PlayStation days. There was nothing really that I could practice on, so I wanted to get a look at the track and what have you, and had a look around, and Rosberg was testing there. So he had two transporters, one which was all the equipment, and the second one was just full of tyres. And literally every single time he went out on the track, he'd put a new set of tyres on. And he did that for 2 days flat out. And after the first day, sort of seeing this happen, I was like, wow, like, this is in Formula 3, might
This is
I
what we're
add.
up
So
against.
this is what you'd be up against, racing against these guys. But, it's sort of, when we were racing in Australia, you get a couple of sets a weekend, and, you try to make them last as long as you possibly could. So it sort of opened your eyes up to European motor racing, like, straight away, and talks, in terms of budget and people trying to make it to the big time, which he obviously did. But I'll never forget, I got one set of new tyres that next day, and it was in my last run, and you get 10 laps on them, and then that's the end of it, sort of thing. So very, very different scenario, but it was a cool experience. After that, I pursued Formula 3000 and tested at Majoni.
Astromega? Who were you with?
Yeah, that was with Coloni.
Okay.
So I went into Perugia and just tested at the circuit, and actually I think we actually went pretty well from memory, because they offered us the drive. But in terms of offering us the drive, which was great, it also came with something like a €2 million invoice. So that was difficult money to sort of pull up for us at the time. So it was something we obviously had to say no to. But a Formula 3000 car was, astonishing. Probably the best car I've ever, in terms of complete race car, without doubt, the best car I've ever driven. Most enjoyment car, that's for sure.
Share a little bit more of that with the audience, because they'll love that. I mean, it's a great chapter for that class of racing, the way they looked and sounded and so on.
So at that circuit, just to put a bit of context there, we had a Passat high car, which they let me take around the track, let's just say, the day, the morning of. It actually... It was the biggest piece of shit, Rusty. But it did the job, because it sort of gave me a gist of which way the track went, and jumped out of that and into the Formula 3000. And we're talking the faster, and I never, in terms of open wheelers, they talk about the faster you go, the more downforce, the more grip, and that sort of works. Sometimes, let's say, you have to be going a certain speed, you need a certain amount of grip. But when you get in one of those cars, the grip level is unbelievable. Like the downforce they produce, it absolutely blew me away, and it gives you that confidence to go faster. And you can sort of see when you watch open wheelers and get an appreciation for why people push harder and harder as they're going faster. And it just does. It gives you that belief that the grip's there and you just want to keep pushing. And obviously there is a point of no return, which I was lucky to never get to, but they are rewarding in that regard. So the grip level, especially on the high-speed corners, was amazing. Lots of power. I mean, the car probably weighed 600 kilos, I think, or 650 kilos, so very, very light. Yeah, it was an enjoyable car to drive. Enjoyable.
I love the vivid memories you've shared there, mate, and I can tell where it sits in your memory bank. Very cool. On the one hand, that's immensely satisfying. The price tag is the kind of reality check. So what happens here? Is there like a sit-down family discussion about which way am I going to go here? Do I want to go down the Supercars path instead? Was there perhaps a mentor, some advice from KB or someone? What did you do next?
By this point, I was under no... I mean, look, I didn't want to put any more on my family. I knew, very much aware. I was very much aware. I didn't want them to put up the house or anything silly like that. So I'd never allow that to happen. But I knew what we could and couldn't do, and that was clearly never going to be achievable for us on our own. So that was, I mentioned earlier about having a break. That was the point where, okay, we're just going to have to stop here because we hadn't planned anything beyond Formula 3 and obviously trying to make it into Formula 3000. So that's where I sat out for a while and then which was hard, but that was really when Jim Morton came back. He was getting out of go-karting and into car racing a bit more, and that was when he said, hey, I'm going to get this Fujitsu series, I think it was at the time, development series car.
Konica, I can't remember.
Yeah, and get that going. And Warren had driven the car the year before, and he said, "Do you want to come and drive for me?" So, had it not been for Jim, absolutely, I don't know, I'd probably be a landscape gardener or something like that, mowing your lawns, probably Rusty, I would have thought.
Let's pick this conversation up, but very quickly, in that period of reflection, what were you doing? Did you have a job?
Yeah. I was a spare parts delivery driver.
Were you? Who for and where?
A little company, a friend of ours who actually got, who we went go-karting with. He had a little mechanical repair spare parts car company, and I was driving around a little Holden Barina. That was my little beast. Fair to say the parts got there pretty quick, which was good, but so
Jim was a great...
That was...
Jim... I was going to say Jim was a great man, mate, wasn't he? And, I think I can recall... Was it Decina bathrooms? I'm trying to remember what the backing was on the car. I reckon I can recall your car at Wakefield Park and so on. Typical him. It was very, for what it was in the second tier of the sport, it was very professionally presented and so on. That's cool that he kind of came to the rescue. Maybe not the right choice of words for me here, but provided that window of opportunity for you.
Absolutely, he did. And when my comment earlier about people that love motor racing will do pretty much anything. Jim had two beautiful daughters, but didn't love motor racing at all. But Jim loved motor racing, so his passion was going racing and providing opportunity and getting enjoyment out of seeing other people succeed and make a career and a living. And obviously, there's a host of names that attach to that, including myself. And that way he just kept giving, like he loved it so much. And that was where the value was for him, is just seeing success and being part of success with some of those household names that we still talk about today. So very lucky. I did motor racing with him in karting my early days, and then to get another chance to join up with him was very very unique. Something that's still holds today, mate.
My grey matter mightn't be right here, mate, but was he Tony Kart? I'm trying to remember what he was in karting.
He was DAP before I got into karting, and then he was the godfather, that as they called him back in the day, of Tony Kart. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. Yep.
Sure was. That's the end of part 1 of my podcast, a well overdue chat with Supercars racer Michael Caruso. If you've enjoyed this one, you'll be pleased to know that part 2 is in the garage library and good to go whenever you have time. What it was like to drive those unique H-pattern Gen 1 supercars coming in during a golden era with household names. The call-up to race Bathurst as a replacement for the Kiwi Mark Porter, who'd been in a frightening crash on the mountain that weekend. Getting the trademark urgent call from Gary Rogers and landing a drive with GRM. The stylish impression he made in that interview. Hands-on learning with that team, his mateship with Lee Holdsworth, and the collective will they had to drive GRM forward. Success in the top end at Darwin. His time with Nissan, which went beyond the Ultima program, shifting gears at record pace and relocating back to Sydney for a change of direction. Plus TV, TCR and a whole lot more on this edition of Rusty's Garage.